The sound of applause still echoes in my nightmares. Not the kind that celebrates success, but the cruel, mocking claps that followed my most humiliating moment today. I'm going to tell you about the night an entire auditorium of my peers watched me fail spectacularly and how I made sure every single one of them had front row seats to witness my ultimate triumph, before I reveal how I turned my greatest shame into my sweetest revenge. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from, and if you've ever been humiliated in front of people who should have supported you. Hit that subscribe button because this story is going to show you exactly how to turn your pain into power. My name is Marcus Chen, and this is the story of how a single night of betrayal turned me from the class clown into a multimillionaire entrepreneur who rebuilt his life just to prove a point. Growing up in San Francisco's Richmond district, I was what you'd call the eternal optimist. While my immigrant parents worked 16-hour days running their small grocery store, I was the kid who believed that hard work, talent, and a good heart could overcome anything. My father would tell me stories about how he came to America with nothing but a suitcase and a dream, building our family's modest success from scratch. Marcus, he'd say in his broken English. In America, if you work hard and stay humble, people will respect you. They will see your heart. I carried that belief with me through high school, where despite being one of only 3 Asian kids in my class, I managed to become student body president, captain of the debate team, and the guy everyone came to when they needed help with their computer problems. I wasn't the coolest or the most popular, but I was well-liked, trusted, and genuinely believed that my classmates saw me as one of them. Stanford University was supposed to be my fresh start. My chance to prove that the son of immigrant shopkeepers could run with the Silicon Valley elite. I'd earned a partial scholarship based on my academic record and leadership experience, covering about 60% of my tuition. My parents scraped together every penny they had for the remaining costs, even taking out a second mortgage on the store. "You are our investment in the American dream," my mother said as she handed me the acceptance letter. "Make us proud, but more importantly, make yourself proud at Stanford." I threw myself into every opportunity. I joined the entrepreneurship club, participated in hackathons, and started a small tutoring business to help cover my living expenses. By my junior year, I had developed a reputation as the guy who could solve any tech problem and the one who always had innovative ideas during group projects. That's when I met the people who would later orchestrate my downfall. Silicon Valley culture is intoxicating, especially for a 20-year-old who grew up watching his parents count every dollar. The tech world promised that ideas could become empires overnight, that the right concept could transform a college dropout into a billionaire. I wanted desperately to be part of that story. The Stanford Venture Capital Club was where the serious players gathered. These weren't just students, they were the sons and daughters of tech executives, investment bankers, and established entrepreneurs. To be accepted into their circle meant access to networking events, startup competitions, and most importantly, the kind of connections that could fast-track your career. I applied to join the club 3 times before finally being accepted in my junior year. The acceptance came with a warning from the club president, a guy named Blake Richardson, whose father had founded 2 successful startups before selling them for hundreds of millions. "Marcus, you're clearly talented," Blake said during my acceptance meeting, "but this club operates differently than what you might be used to. We invest real money, we make real connections, and we expect real results. Can you handle that level of pressure?" "I've been handling pressure my whole life," I replied confidently. What I didn't realize was that Blake's definition of pressure was very different from mine. The club's inner circle consisted of 6 students who came from what they called legacy families, tech royalty, whose parents had shaped Silicon Valley. Over the past 3 decades, there was Blake Richardson, whose father had co-founded a social media platform before Facebook, Sarah Hendricks, whose mother was a partner at one of Sand Hill Road's most prestigious VC firms, Michael Torres, whose family had made their fortune in semiconductor manufacturing, Jessica Chang, whose parents owned a chain of successful tech startups across Asia, David Kim, whose father was a senior executive at Google, and finally, Amanda Foster, whose grandfather had been one of the original investors in Apple. I was the outsider, the scholarship kid who'd earned his way in through merit rather than birthright. But they seemed to accept me, even embrace me as their token bootstrap success story. "You bring something different to the group," Amanda told me after my first month in the club. You understand struggle in a way we never will. That perspective is valuable. I felt honored to be their diversity hire. Their proof that the club welcomed talent from all backgrounds. Looking back, I should have recognized the condescension in her tone, but I was too grateful for the acceptance to see it clearly. Everything changed during the spring semester of my senior year when I developed what I thought was a revolutionary idea for a social platform. The concept was simple but powerful. A networking app specifically designed for first-generation college students and young professionals who lacked traditional connections. The platform would work like LinkedIn but with features specifically tailored to people who were navigating professional world without family guidance. Users could find mentors, connect with others from similar backgrounds, access career resources, and most importantly, build the kind of networks that privileged kids took for granted. I'd been working on the idea for months, developing the business plan, creating mock-ups, and even building a basic prototype. The more I refined the concept, the more convinced I became that it could address a real need in the market. There were millions of first-generation college students who faced the same challenges I did, trying to break into industries where success often depended more on who you knew than what you knew. The Stanford Venture Capital Club held an annual pitch competition called Future Unicorns, where student entrepreneurs presented their business ideas to a panel of actual venture capitalists. The winning concept received a $50,000 seed investment and mentorship from established startup founders. It was exactly the kind of opportunity that could transform a college project into a real business. I spent 3 months perfecting my pitch, working late into the night to refine my presentation slides, practice my delivery, and anticipate every possible question the judges might ask. My parents were skeptical but supportive, worried that I was spending too much time on this hobby instead of focusing on getting a traditional job after graduation. Marcus, dreams are beautiful. My father said one evening as he found me working on my pitch at 2 a.m., but dreams don't pay rent. Maybe you should also prepare for more practical options. But I was convinced that this was my moment, my chance to prove that hard work and innovation could level the playing field between me and my privileged classmates. 2 weeks before the competition, I shared my fully developed business plan with the club's inner circle during our regular meeting. I wanted their feedback, their insights, and hopefully their support during the pitch. This is actually brilliant, Blake said after reviewing my presentation. The market research is solid. The technical implementation is feasible, and the social impact could be significant. The others nodded in agreement, offering suggestions for improving specific slides and refining my messaging. Sarah even volunteered to help me practice my pitch, scheduling several mock presentation sessions where she played the role of a skeptical investor. You need to be more confident. She told me after one practice session, this idea is good enough to win, but you have to present it like you believe it's revolutionary. For the first time since joining the club, I felt like I truly belonged. These weren't just my classmates, they were my collaborators, my advisors, my friends. I was so grateful for their support that I didn't question why they suddenly seemed so interested in helping me succeed. The night before the competition, the club threw a small party at Blake's off-campus apartment to celebrate all the participants. The atmosphere was relaxed and encouraging, with everyone sharing final words of advice and support. Tomorrow is your day, Marcus, Amanda said, raising her glass in a toast. We're all rooting for you. I went to bed that night feeling more confident than I'd ever felt in my life. The Future Unicorns competition was held in Stanford's largest auditorium, with over 800 people in attendance, including students, faculty, venture capitalists, and local tech industry leaders. The energy was electric, with 12 finalist teams preparing to present their ideas to a panel of 5 judges who collectively managed over $2 billion in investment capital. I was scheduled to present 7th, right after the dinner break. As I sat in the audience watching the first 6 presentations, I felt a mixture of excitement and nerves. Some of the ideas were impressive, others seemed half-baked. But I was confident that my concept was unique and well-researched enough to stand out. During the break, Blake approached me backstage. Hey, I just wanted to wish you luck one more time. You've got this, thanks for all the help, I replied. I couldn't have refined the pitch without you guys. That's what friends are for, he said with a smile that I would later recognize as something much more sinister. When my name was called, I walked onto the stage feeling ready to change my life. The presentation began smoothly. I explained the problem, outlined my solution, shared my market research, and demonstrated my prototype. The audience seemed engaged, nodding along with my key points and even laughing at a few of my jokes. Then I reached the part of my presentation where I planned to show my business model and revenue projections. The slides were gone, not just different, completely gone. In their place were slides I'd never seen before, but they looked exactly like my presentation format. The same fonts, the same color scheme, the same visual style. But instead of my carefully crafted business plan, these slides contained what appeared to be a completely different startup idea. The concept on the screen was called Alike Connect, a networking platform designed specifically for students and young professionals from affluent families to connect with each other and maintain their social advantages in the business world. It was essentially the opposite of my idea, promoting exclusivity rather than inclusion. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was that Alike Connect was clearly presented as a parody, a satirical take on Silicon Valley privilege. The slides included jokes about keeping the riffraff out of our networks and maintaining generational wealth through strategic connections. There were even fake testimonials from imaginary users saying things like, "Finally, a platform that helps me avoid networking with people beneath my social class." The audience began to murmur as they realized what they were seeing. Some people started laughing, not with me, but at me. I was standing on stage, my own presentation hijacked, looking like I was deliberately mocking the very problem I'd spent months trying to solve. I tried to explain that these weren't my slides, that someone had sabotaged my presentation, but my voice cracked with panic and embarrassment. The microphone amplified my confusion, making me sound even more lost and unprepared. "I'm sorry," I stammered. "These aren't the right slides. My presentation is about inclusive networking, not this." One of the judges, a venture capitalist named Robert Chen, no relation, interrupted me. "Mr. Chen, are you saying you didn't prepare these slides?" "No, sir, someone switched them. My real presentation is about helping first-generation college students build professional networks." The audience's murmur grew louder. I could hear scattered laughter and whispered comments. In the front row, I saw my club members Blake, Sarah, Michael, Jessica, David, and Amanda, all looking appropriately shocked and concerned. They were good actors, I'll give them that, Mr. Chen. Another judge said, "We need to move on to the next presenter. If you'd like to reschedule, you can contact our office." But I knew there wouldn't be a reschedule. This was my one shot, and it was over. As I walked off the stage, the applause began. It wasn't the supportive applause you'd give to someone who'd just experienced a technical difficulty. This was the kind of applause people give when they've witnessed something uncomfortable and want to end the awkwardness as quickly as possible. But some of the applause was different. Some of it was gleeful, mocking, the sound of people who were genuinely entertained by watching someone fail spectacularly. In the front row, my club members were clapping politely, their faces masks of sympathy and concern. But I caught something in their expressions, a fleeting moment where their mask slipped and I saw what looked like satisfaction. That's when I knew. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I spent hours going through my laptop trying to figure out how my presentation had been sabotaged. My original slides were gone, deleted from my computer and my cloud storage. But I'm good with technology, and I know how to recover deleted files. What I found was worse than I'd imagined. The files showed that the Alike Connect parody slides had been created using my Stanford account. But the timestamp indicated they'd been made 2 weeks earlier, right after I'd shared my business plan with the club. The metadata showed that the files had been accessed multiple times from different IP addresses, including locations that matched Blake's apartment and Sarah's dorm room. But the real smoking gun was an email thread I discovered in my deleted folder. Someone had used my account to send messages to the competition organizers, requesting a last-minute update to my presentation slides. The email was written in my name, but I'd never sent it. I was able to trace the login that sent the email to a computer in the Stanford library, a computer that was checked out to Jessica Chang during the time the email was sent. They hadn't just sabotaged my presentation, they'd planned it carefully, using my own account to make it look like I'd deliberately submitted the parody slides. If I complained about being sabotaged, the evidence would suggest I was lying to cover up my own poor judgment. It was sophisticated, cruel, and perfectly executed, but why? The answer came when I checked the competition results online the next morning. Blake Richardson had won first place with his presentation about Connected, a networking platform designed to help first-generation college students build professional connections. It was my idea, every single element of my business plan, from the market research to the technical implementation, had been recreated in Blake's presentation. He'd even used some of my exact phrasing, though he was smart enough to rework most of the content to avoid obvious plagiarism. The judges praised Blake's innovative approach to addressing inequality in professional networking and his deep understanding of the challenges faced by underrepresented communities. One judge specifically mentioned how refreshing it was to see a student from a privileged background using his advantages to help others. Blake received the $50,000 investment, the mentorship opportunity, and most importantly, the credibility that comes with winning Stanford's most prestigious entrepreneurship competition. I had been completely, utterly, and deliberately destroyed. The story of my presentation disaster spread quickly through Stanford's business community. Within a week, I was known as the guy who'd tried to present a satirical parody as a serious business proposal. The truth that my presentation had been sabotaged sounded like the desperate excuse of someone trying to cover up a massive failure. Marcus, maybe you should consider that you might have uploaded the wrong slides by mistake, suggested Professor Williams, my entrepreneurship advisor, when I tried to explain what had happened. Sometimes when we're nervous, we make errors we don't remember making. Even my closest friends began to distance themselves from me. The story had been twisted through repeated retellings, and by the time it reached most people, I was described as someone who deliberately mocked first-generation college students as a misguided attempt at humor. "I can't believe you thought that was funny," said Jenny, a girl I'd been dating casually, "making fun of people like yourself. That's just sad." My parents were confused and disappointed. They'd taken time off from the store to attend the competition, proudly watching from the back of the auditorium as their son prepared to present his business idea. Instead, they'd witnessed my humiliation and still didn't fully understand what had gone wrong. "Marcus, we don't care about competitions," my mother said, trying to comfort me. "You still have good grades. You can still get a good job. This doesn't change anything." But it changed everything for me. The people I'd trusted most had systematically destroyed my reputation, stolen my work, and turned my moment of triumph into a public humiliation. Worse, they'd done it so cleverly that I couldn't prove it without looking like a sore loser. Blake and his crew continued to act like concerned friends, occasionally checking in on me with expressions of sympathy and support. "Marcus, I'm so sorry about what happened," Amanda said when she ran into me at the library. "That was really unfortunate. Have you thought about what went wrong?" The casual cruelty was almost worse than the initial betrayal. They weren't just satisfied with destroying me, they wanted to watch me suffer, to see if I'd break down and give them the satisfaction of knowing they'd completely defeated me. I graduated from Stanford 3 months later with no job prospects, no business plan, and no clear direction for my future, while my classmates celebrated their offers from Google, Facebook, and prestigious consulting firms. I moved back into my childhood bedroom above my parents' grocery store. "It's temporary," I told myself, "just until I figure out my next move." But as the weeks turned into months, I began to wonder if I'd ever recover from what they'd done to me. The next 2 years were the darkest of my life. I took a job as a technical support specialist for a small software company, making $35,000 a year and living with my parents. Every day felt like a reminder of how far I'd fallen from the ambitious entrepreneur I'd once believed I could become. The worst part wasn't the financial struggle or the professional stagnation. It was watching Blake Richardson's meteoric rise from afar. Connected had launched 6 months after graduation, backed by the $50,000 competition prize and additional investment from Sarah's mother's VC firm. The platform was exactly what I'd envisioned, a networking tool for first-generation college students and young professionals. Blake had even hired a small team of developers to build the features I'd prototyped in my original business plan. The tech press loved the story. A privileged Stanford graduate using his advantages to help underrepresented communities, Blake was featured in TechCrunch, Wired, and Forbes as an example of how Silicon Valley could become more inclusive. He gave interviews about his inspiration, to help first-generation college students, never mentioning that his inspiration had come from stealing my life's work. Within 18 months, Connected had raised $5 million in series of funding. Blake hired several of our former classmates, including Jessica and David from the club. The company moved into a sleek office in Palo Alto, complete with the kind of startup perks that had become Silicon Valley clichés: ping pong tables, free meals, and meditation rooms. Meanwhile, I was debugging software issues for 8 hours a day and spending my evenings helping my parents manage their grocery store's books. The contrast was suffocating. "You should be proud of what that boy accomplished with your idea," my father said one evening as we watched a news segment about Connected's latest funding round. "At least someone is helping people like us." He meant it kindly, but his words cut deeper than any deliberate insult could have. My own father couldn't see that Blake was being celebrated for implementing the vision I'd developed. To him, it just looked like a successful person doing good work. The isolation was crushing. I'd lost contact with most of my Stanford friends, partly because I was embarrassed about my situation and partly because many of them had moved on to careers and lives that felt completely out of reach. Social media made it worse. Constant updates about promotions, engagements, and achievements from people who'd started at the same place I had but somehow ended up in completely different worlds. I started having panic attacks, usually triggered by unexpected reminders of the competition night, the sound of applause on TV, seeing Blake's face in tech publications. Even walking past the Stanford campus would send me into a spiral of anxiety and self-doubt. Maybe I should see someone. I told my mother after a particularly bad episode, where I'd hyperventilated in the grocery store after a customer mentioned seeing Blake on the news. "Talking helps," she agreed. "But Marcus, talking won't change what happened. Only action can do that." Her words stuck with me, though it would take several more months before I understood what she meant. The moment that changed everything happened on a rainy Tuesday evening in October. Exactly 2 years after the competition, I was working late at the software company, trying to resolve a particularly complex bug, when I received an email that would redirect the entire course of my life. The message was from Dr. Patricia Hernandez, a professor of entrepreneurship at UC Berkeley who'd been one of the judges at the Stanford competition. She was reaching out because she'd recently learned some disturbing information about the events of that night. "Marcus," she wrote, "I hope you remember me from the Future Unicorns competition. I was one of the judges who witnessed your presentation. Difficulties. I'm writing because a former Stanford student recently shared some information with me that I believe you should know. Would you be available to meet for coffee this week? I think we need to discuss what really happened that night." My hands shook as I read the email. After 2 years of silence, someone was finally acknowledging that there might be more to the story than my apparent failure. We met at a cafe in Berkeley 2 days later. Dr. Hernandez was a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and the no-nonsense demeanor of someone who'd spent decades in academia. She ordered her coffee black and got straight to the point. "Marcus, what I'm about to tell you might be difficult to hear, but I think you deserve to know the truth. A former Stanford student came to me last month with information about your presentation at the competition. She was part of the group that sabotaged you." My heart stopped. "Which student?" "Sarah Hendricks. She's been struggling with guilt about what happened, and she finally decided to come forward." According to her, the entire thing was planned by Blake Richardson and several other members of your club. They wanted to steal your business idea and eliminate you as competition. Dr. Hernandez pulled out a folder containing printed screenshots of text messages, emails, and social media conversations. The evidence was overwhelming. Detailed discussions about how to access my Stanford account, plans for creating the parody slides, and even celebratory messages after the sabotage was successful. Blake Richardson built his entire company on your stolen intellectual property. She continued. "Sarah provided me with copies of your original business plan, which she kept as insurance. The similarities between your concept and Connected are undeniable." I stared at the evidence, feeling a mixture of vindication and rage. Finally, proof that I wasn't crazy, that I hadn't imagined the betrayal, that the people I trusted had deliberately destroyed me. "Why is Sarah coming forward now?" I asked. "She says she's been watching Connected's success and feeling increasingly guilty about profiting from what she knows is stolen work. She left the company 6 months ago and has been considering going public with the truth. She wanted to talk to me first because she was one of the judges and she wanted to understand what her options were. Dr. Hernandez leaned forward, her expression serious. Marcus, you have grounds for a lawsuit: intellectual property theft, fraud, intentional interference with business relationships. You could probably destroy Blake's company and recover significant damages. The possibility of legal revenge was tempting, but something about it felt hollow. Destroying Blake wouldn't undo the damage he'd caused or restore the 2 years I'd lost. It would just make me another person seeking to tear down rather than build up. What would you do? I asked. She smiled. I'd make sure they regretted underestimating you, but I wouldn't do it through lawsuits or scandals. I'd do it by building something so much better than what they stole that everyone would know who the real innovator was. That night, I sat in my childhood bedroom and did something I hadn't done in 2 years. I opened a blank document and began writing a business plan. But this wasn't just any business plan. This was a declaration of war disguised as an entrepreneurial venture. I spent the next 6 months developing a concept that would make Connected look like the amateur art project it actually was. Instead of just building a networking platform for first-generation college students, I designed an entire ecosystem of tools and resources for underrepresented communities in business. The platform I envisioned would include networking features, but also mentorship, matching, skills development courses, job placement assistance, startup incubation programs, and even microlending for small business development. It would be comprehensive, sophisticated, and most importantly, it would actually solve the problems that Connected only pretended to address. I called it Rise Up, a name that reflected both the upward mobility we were facilitating and my own journey from rock bottom back to the top. The technical challenge was enormous. I was essentially trying to build what would normally require a team of 50 people, but I had advantages that Blake's team didn't. I understood the user base intimately because I was part of it. I had nothing to lose, and I was fueled by a level of determination that only comes from having been completely betrayed by people you trusted. I quit my job at the software company and moved back into my parents' house full-time. For the next 18 months, I lived like a monk, spending every waking hour coding, designing, testing, and refining my platform. My parents worried about my obsessive focus, but they also recognized the change in my demeanor. You look like yourself again, my mother observed one evening as she brought me dinner while I worked. Not happy, but yourself. She was right. For the first time since the competition, I felt like I had purpose again. Every line of code I wrote was a step closer to proving that Blake and his friends had made a massive mistake when they decided to destroy me instead of compete with me fairly. The first version of Rise Up launched quietly in January 2019. 3 years after the Stanford competition, I had no marketing budget, no press coverage, and no venture capital backing. What I had was a platform that actually worked and a deep understanding of what my users needed. I started by reaching out to first-generation college students at universities across California, offering free access to all of Rise Up's features. In exchange for feedback and testimonials, the response was immediate and overwhelming. This is exactly what I needed when I was starting college, wrote Maria Rodriguez, a UC Berkeley student who'd struggled to find internships despite excellent grades. The mentorship matching connected me with someone who understood my background and could actually help me navigate the professional world. Within 6 months, Rise Up had 5,000 active users. Within a year, we'd grown to 25,000 users across all 50 states. The platform was generating revenue through premium subscriptions, corporate partnerships, and training programs, but more importantly, it was creating real results for people who'd been overlooked by traditional networking platforms. The growth was organic and sustainable, driven by word-of-mouth recommendations from users who genuinely benefited from the platform. Unlike Connected, which had focused on raising venture capital and generating press coverage, Rise Up was built around solving actual problems and creating measurable value. 2 years after launch, Rise Up had 100,000 users and was generating $2 million in annual revenue. We'd helped over 15,000 people find jobs, connected 8,000 mentorship pairs, and facilitated the launch of over 500 small businesses through our microlending program. The numbers were impressive, but the stories were what mattered most, like David Park, a first-generation Korean American who used Rise Up's resources to transition from construction work to software development, or Jennifer Martinez, who leveraged our small business incubation program to turn her food truck into a chain of restaurants, or Michael Washington, who found his mentor through our platform and eventually launched a nonprofit that was now helping hundreds of other young men from low-income communities. These weren't just user testimonials, they were proof that my original vision had been correct, that there was a massive underserved market of people who needed better tools to build professional networks and advance their careers. By early 2021, RiseUp had become impossible to ignore. TechCrunch ran a feature story about our platform, calling it the anti-elitist answer to professional networking. Forbes included me in their 30 under 30 list for social entrepreneurs. Harvard Business School invited me to speak about building inclusive technology platforms. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was now being celebrated by the same tech press that had once praised Blake Richardson for stealing my idea. But the recognition felt different this time because it was based on actual results rather than just marketing hype. More importantly, other entrepreneurs and investors were starting to notice the contrast between RiseUp's organic growth and Connected struggles. Blake's company had raised over $20 million in funding, but was having trouble demonstrating real user engagement or measurable impact. They'd focused so much on scaling quickly that they'd never actually built features that users found valuable. Connected feels like a solution looking for a problem, wrote one industry analyst in a comparison piece between our platforms. RiseUp, on the other hand, clearly understands its users' needs and has built features that create genuine value. The comparison articles were becoming more frequent, and they weren't favorable to Blake's company. Tech journalists were starting to ask difficult questions about Connected's business model, user retention rates, and actual social impact. The platform that had been held up as a model of inclusive entrepreneurship was being exposed as a well-funded but ultimately hollow venture. In March 2021, I received an email that made me smile for the first time in years. It was from a venture capital firm offering to invest $15 million in RiseUp's series of funding round. The offer valued my company at $50 million, exactly 10 times what Blake had received for stealing my original idea. But the best part wasn't the money or the validation. It was the name at the bottom of the email, Sarah Hendricks, who had left her mother's VC firm to start her own investment fund focused on underrepresented entrepreneurs. Marcus, she wrote, I know we have history, and I know I can never fully make up for what I was part of at Stanford, but I want you to know that watching you build RiseUp has been one of the most inspiring things I've witnessed in this industry. If you're open to it, I'd love to discuss how my fund can support your mission. I accepted Sarah's investment offer, not because I'd forgiven her, but because I wanted her to watch up close as I dismantled everything Blake had built with my stolen idea. Our first investor meeting was uncomfortable but necessary, a chance for her to apologize properly and for me to understand why she'd participated in my destruction. I was young and stupid and desperate to fit in with Blake's group, she explained during our private conversation before the formal investment meeting. I knew what we were doing was wrong, but I convinced myself that you'd be fine. That one setback wouldn't matter in the long run. You destroyed 2 years of my life, I replied. You made me question my own sanity and my ability to succeed. Do you understand what that does to a person? Sarah nodded, tears in her eyes. I think about it every day, watching you rebuild from nothing while Blake's company struggles with the foundation you created. It's poetic justice, but it's also a reminder of how wrong I was about everything. The investment process was thorough and professional. Sarah's fund conducted extensive due diligence on RiseUp's business model, user metrics, and growth projections. What they found was a company that was not only financially successful, but also creating measurable social impact, exactly what her fund was designed to support. During the final presentation to her investment committee, I included a slide that I'd been planning for months. It was a side-by-side comparison of RiseUp and Connected, showing user engagement rates, revenue growth, and social impact metrics. The contrast was devastating. Connected raised $20 million and has struggled to achieve sustainable growth or demonstrate real value for their users, I explained to the committee. RiseUp has been profitable since year two and has documented success stories from thousands of users who've advanced their careers through our platform. One of the committee members raised his hand. Marcus, this is impressive, but I have to ask, what's your long-term strategy for competing with Connected? They have significant resources and established market presence. I smiled. Connected won't be our competition much longer. Their business model is fundamentally flawed because it was built by people who didn't understand the problem they were trying to solve. When you steal someone's idea without understanding their vision, you miss the crucial details that make the difference between success and failure. The investment was approved unanimously. With $15 million in funding, RiseUp accelerated rapidly. We expanded to international markets, launched new features based on user feedback, and began partnering with major corporations that wanted to improve their diversity and inclusion efforts. By the end of 2021, we had 500,000 users and were generating $15 million in annual revenue. Connected, meanwhile, was struggling to maintain relevance. Their user base had plateaued at around 50,000 active users, and several major investors were questioning whether the company could justify its high valuation. Tech blogs were starting to write articles with titles like "Whatever Happened to Connected?" and "The Networking Platform That Failed to Network." The final blow came in February 2022, when TechCrunch published an investigative piece about Connected's founding story. The article, titled "The Stolen Startup: How Silicon Valley's Favorite Feel-Good Story Was Built on Betrayal," detailed everything: the Stanford competition sabotage, the intellectual property theft, and the systematic destruction of my original business concept. Sarah had provided the journalist with the evidence she'd collected, including text messages, emails, and documentation proving that Blake had stolen my business plan. The article included quotes from multiple sources, including Dr. Hernandez and several Stanford students who'd witnessed the original events. Marcus Chen developed the original concept for what would become Connected, the article stated. Blake Richardson and his associates